Hello, everybody, and welcome to Senza Fili Sparring Partners. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and I'm your podcast host. Today, I have two guests, two fellow analysts, and at this point, I would say friends, because we see each other all the time at different analyst events and other industry events. So I have Emmy Johnson, who is the founder and principal analyst at Skylight Research, and Daryl Schoolar is the director at Reckon Analytics. And today what we're going to talk about is what is that analysts expect? How is that we learn as analysts about the industry, how we find out things? And what is that we think works better or not? And, this is clearly our own personal take on it. But I think that there are some commonalities. So when I talk to other analysts, oftentimes I hear similar things. So said that, I would like to ask Emmy and Daryl to introduce themselves. Daryl has been on Sparring Partners before, so Emmy goes first. Emmy, over to you.
All right. Hey, Monica. Hey, Daryl. I'm Emmy Johnson. I'm principal analyst and founder at Skylight Research. Skylight has been around since 2001, and we track the microwave transport industry, mobile backhaul industry on a quarterly basis, and also do 5-year forecasts. Also, lately, we've also been covering sustainability and energy topics, as well as NTN satellite topics.
Excellent. Daryl.
Yes, my name is Daryl Schoolar. So I'm a director and analyst at Recon Analytics. Recon Analytics has been around for 11 years, and we focus really on the voice of the customer, or say customer insights within telecommunications. And that's both, say, the operator themselves, their own customers' insights into the trends, wants, needs, unhappiness of consumer and business users of telecom services, and on the infrastructure side, providing infrastructure companies with insights into actually what operators want and like, since operators are the customers of the vendors. So that is our focus.
Yes, and to give you a little bit of background, I tend to have a little bit of a broader remit, and but usually I work on technology, so I don't do market forecasts. So I look at technology rather than say what mobile operators think, or do market research. As I said, Emmy and Daryl and we meet oftentimes at events, and probably not surprising, but the whole community of analysts, we just meet each other oftentimes. So just think of like we are a circus moving around, and it's always the same people. Surprising. There's some new guys. but at the same time, it's just that, like, the three of us today, we do have a very different focus and interest. So maybe what Daryl thinks is really cool and interesting, I was saying so it is very hard for anybody that tries to reach out to analysts to get everybody happy. And you can see that. So, because everybody has his own different focus. And so, I think that we understand the challenge there, but maybe we can sort of start, talking about, what is that we see, and, I'll ask you, first, so after COVID, now we have many more in-person events, but not as many as I think we had before. We want to be more selective in what we are attending. There is much more going on virtually still. So maybe you want to start saying, what is that we like, we don't like, what is that it's valuable to us?
So personally, I like the in-person events. But you're right, there is a balance that you have to keep with the time and the projects that you have ahead of you, as well as the travel to the events. But I think the in-person events, I think where they are really beneficial over a webinar is there's also that networking opportunity where you can talk to the executives, you can talk to the product managers, and you can really find out more about like what's driving the company and answer some of your questions. And although there is that opportunity on webinars, just the social networking piece of it is missing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not the same. So if you're on a webinar and you're on there and, it's you and 30, 40 other industry peers, if you ask a question, a lot of times there's follow-ups, there's nuances to it that you want to go to, and you cannot hog up that webinar by following up on all your questions. But, in an in-person event, yeah, it's much easier just to say, hey, I got some questions. Obviously, the whole audience doesn't want to sit through. You can get them to the side and do the networking, or, either talk there or arrange follow-up. You just don't get that with the webinar.
Yeah, but okay, so for those of you that are not, not everybody in the audience is going to be necessarily familiar with how this kind of things work. So in an analyst in-person event, we would go to one location, whatever in the world, and we'd be there for like 1 to say 3 days, and there would be some dinners, receptions, presentations, one-on-one meetings, demos, and all of that. And then we go back. And so it's a bunch of analysts, and usually it's one company doing the briefing and the event. What both of you said is like what you value in the event. And I completely agree with you. It's really the opportunity to network. However, I feel that sometimes what happens is that when we go to these meetings, there is a lot of like, sort of keynotes talks, and some of them kind of be general. And I understand that they have to do it, but I really think that, really is the networking part. And sometimes in some of these events, we get a lot of the preset presentations, which are not all that different from a webinar. And there is not enough time to really have this kind of not necessarily one-on-one, but a kind of social, unstructured conversation, which is, that's really where I actually learned most of the stuff. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I agree with, go ahead, Daryl.
No, I do agree. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I do find annoying is that when you do take the time out from your life and you travel somewhere for a conference, so you go through, the presentations and all that, but then they don't make anybody available afterwards. So they'll take you to a dinner or whatever like that. But everybody that works at the company, all the people that they brought maybe from operators, they just disappear. So you just sit in the room staring at the same people you saw 3 weeks ago at another conference. That is something I do find annoying, is like when they don't make, people available afterwards.
Absolutely. And I also think it's important when you invite your audience that you segment the journalists from the industry analysts from the financial analysts. Because if there's journalists there, they're not going to be as forthcoming about their product strategy, and maybe even with the financial analysts. And we're all, as an industry analyst, we're really interested in the technology of the product. Where's the product going? And I think sometimes that gets clouded and a little bit too fluffed up when there's journalists and financial analysts in the room.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hint as both of you two important issues. One is the ability to go beyond the kind of the press release and the PowerPoint, fancy saying. It's really, what I really appreciate is when one company acknowledges that there is something that it was hard for them to do, that maybe they had a problem and they solved it, or maybe they haven't. And so this is where you actually learn. It's not about the success, the sort of success. Not that you want to only talk about failures, and that's not what I'm talking about. But to really give an honest appraisal of what's going on. This is where you actually learn, and actually you build trust with the with the people you're talking to, because we're talking to people, we're not talking to the company. And so it's I think it's really important. And back to Daryl's point is that it's really important to have more of a networking experience. And I would say that it's valuable to us, but it must be valuable to the people that do it from the company point of view, because we have to travel there, but they have to travel there too most of the time. They have to put a lot of effort into preparing the presentation or whatever. And I think that, isn't that useful for them to hear what we think about that? Not in the Q&A section, but, really say, this is what we think. Not that, it's life-changing necessarily, but isn't that helpful for them as well,
I would think so, because for one, when you have these side conversations in this networking, you're not just taking information from them, you're exchanging information. So whether it's how did their presentation, how was it portrayed and how was it viewed by the listeners, or whether you have insight from what you've learned at other things, just with general market information. So I think that's where the exchange of information comes and the value. And then also, if they do keep away from the keynote type presentations and the fluffed up presentations, you generally come away from that event with a more positive viewpoint of that company and their strategy.
Yeah, there's definitely an art to putting on a conference. In terms of well, one, go back to what Emmy said, like when you have a different type of audience there. So, I mean, my personal preference is, so I know you get in the first morning, it's everybody together. So I know for a rule, there's going to be a lot of the high level type presentations. You may not get a lot out of it in terms of something new, but it may not just be few the analysts, but it kind of sets the stage for the rest of the day. But I do like when it's a well-run conference, after you get to that kind of initial section, they start to, segment the different groups, so where they take the financial people off to one area. They have a different type of question. They want to know a lot about like margins and sourcing and things like that. And the journalists in another one and the analysts in another track. So I always appreciate when they start to do that and they start to divide us, and then even maybe when subject matter start to focus in more. I think that's where you really get a lot. So, I know the big upfront stuff is often of limited value, but does help set the day. But when the art is when they start to divide you down and start going into, different, backgrounds and topic focus. And that's where it gets.
Yeah, when you have like the small groups, those are actually really interesting because you have a few analysts and a few people from the company. And so it's actually interesting to see what the other analysts ask as well. But that's where you can go deeper down and into details that most of the other analysts wouldn't necessarily care about. So that's
And even just within the industry analyst group, you need to break it down by technology sector. So because some people may be really interested in the breakdown of RAN and not so much of the core, but and vice versa. So you need to be cognizant of that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially for some companies that, they do, well, not everything, but, they just have a wide scope of, what they do.
Definitely, yeah. If it's a broad company, they definitely have to separate you.
Yeah.
If they'll be respectful of your time. If you're taking a couple of days out of your work life, you definitely want to get something out of it.
Yeah, it is, it is a lot of work. Now, one thing that I think has been changing, and not for the best, is that how many demos we have to go through in some of those things. And I personally just don't find them all that useful. Like when 5G was coming about, how many demos did we have to go through when we sit in the bus for an hour? There's always somebody's missing, so we're always late. And just to show us how much the throughput is, and it's like, well, cool, but you can just tell us. You can just show us a movie. And what I found very helpful is to actually go on site at the company, and like I think at some point we went to see somewhere where they were doing some testing of the equipment. I thought that was great. Or you see some of the manufacturing parts. I mean, something like that. That's really cool. But the demos, I mean, I would say 90% of them, they just require a lot of effort on everybody, on the company to do them. And I don't know that I'm really getting a whole lot out of it. What do you guys think?
I would agree to a point. Like a lot of times they're overkill and they go on for too long. I can understand why they want to do that because they're proud of this technology and they've been working on it. But at the same time, I do think that there's a fine line between not that interesting and or kind of going on too long versus um, relevant. What they could just show us on a video or something.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of these demos, I sit through them, and so they show you this amazing throughput or something like that. But like, we also know that these are kind of staged and aren't real world, so it's a little bit of so what. Like, yeah, this is great, but I'm never gonna have my phone, 15 yards away from a, massive MIMO antenna to see the throughput. And it just drags out the day. But what I do like, yeah, what you brought up, I thought was actually good. I do enjoy more like someone going on the site and yeah, seeing the testing and the R&D to kind of get a sense of, what's behind the company. How do they do what they do? Which I find is a lot of times much more interesting than just seeing yeah, a demo. But some demos just look fake. Let's be honest. Some of them just
Yeah.
look like it's something that they filmed and they put on a screen, or they'll press a button and they'll have blinking lights showing a traffic and another blinking light showing something else. And it's never going to be happening.
Right. And it is an artificial environment because there's going to be so many other factors. It's not going to be the only link. It's not going to be the only
Yeah.
base station. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about other things. So, there's just so many analyst meetings we can individually go to. So obviously we're gonna have a lot of them, which is like virtual, and we talked a little bit about that. But what about meeting at a conference? Because so you go to Mobile World Congress and you get flooded by over requests. Meet this, this, and this, and it's just so much time. And so how do you pick and how should we think about it? Like personally, I absolutely love the pre-Mobile World Congress briefings because if it's a formal briefing, much better to do it before, and then a Mobile World Congress which can just have more sort of kind of social informal meetings because that's all my brain can actually do a Mobile World Congress. But anyway, what do you guys think about it? And it's not just Mobile World Congress. I mean, how do you think of the rest of it?
You want to start, Emmy?
Oh, you can. Go ahead.
All right. No, I agree with you. I mean, not every vendor I'm going to meet with can do that. I mean, some have the resources, some don't. Some, bigger than others. So like, definitely when I look at the bigger vendors out there, I do like when they do the pre-briefing. So you kind of know, what you want to meet with them about. So you have an idea. So you can use the actual time there at the conference for your follow-up questions. You can take that 30 minutes and do that. One thing, and there used to be one company, I'm not going to name it because while they're still there, the person that used to do this is no longer with them. But they used to have one of the things that was not really helpful as an analyst. So they would do the pre-briefing, and of course, like most big companies, they throw like 5 or 6 different things at you in the briefing. So when you get to the booth, the AR person would hand me a piece of paper saying, all right, for my pre-brief, here are the 5 things that we covered. And, there'd be like 2, 3 sentences under each topic. Because they're like, I know you've been running around. It's been a week or two. You've sat through tons of other ones of these. Here's the paper to refresh your memory real quick before you go into the meeting. Which, for me, I get forgetful. I always found that to be such an excellent tool in terms of getting the best use of my time. Like I said, they say, oh yeah, I really wanted to ask about this. I wanted to ask about that. Instead of sitting there saying, what was it that they told me about?
Yeah. I think it's important. This doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes you get to the booth for a meeting And then they say, oh yeah, you're going to be just getting demos, where
Ooh,
you're like,
Yeah.
I would have never scheduled this meeting had I known it was just demos the whole time. So I think it's important to be upfront with the analyst as to
mhm.
what the format of the meeting is going to be.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear you. That's um now let me ask some sort of quick fire questions. Um, so do you think that there is too much, too little, just right of virtual events, like the webinars and updates?
It's kind of tricky because it's a good way to have to announce a new product or a new technology. But when they go on for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, then it gets a little long. It's nice when you have the agenda ahead of time so you
Mhm.
know when to like key into the event if it is going to be that long. Um, but I mean, and you can always choose which ones you want to tune into and which ones you don't. So it's really more up to you as to what you want to do. But if that's their only avenue for communicating with you, or as far and they're replacing that with an in-person briefing over the phone, or sorry, and a briefing over the phone or an in-person event, then it gets a little repetitive just to keep having these webinars.
They have gotten better. I remember, right? So when we back in 2020, when everything went off the rails, people were trying to, excuse me, do these virtual ones, and it would be like an all-day event, which is just impossible to do if you're sitting at your desk. So
Yeah.
they have gotten better over the last several years in terms of, you know, 2 hours seems to be just about the max these days that they do it. Or some of the other ones, what they'll do is like, maybe they'll have like, an hour in the morning, nothing, and they'll schedule you something maybe 3 hours later for another little bit. So they'll spread it out so you're not sitting there. So I think that's a much better practice. Um, in terms of like the amount and stuff, and the way I just kind of imagine, there's some things I think that are like very pertinent. Either I'm working on it right now, so hey, this is great timing, or it's a vendor or an operator I talk to a lot that's very, top of mind always in my research that, I attend live. But like other ones are, good to know, but don't always have to need to know. So I really appreciate the ones where they'll send you a link to the recording afterwards
Mm.
and you can play it at, 1.5 speed at your own leisure. Because you just can't always just interrupt your day with, especially given the amount. So you just kind of got to prioritize which ones are live and which ones are recorded.
Yeah, and I think that also they're sort of getting a little bit more reasonable, not just in terms of length, but also in terms of frequency. Because it used
Yeah.
to be like some companies just have one every week, and it's like ridiculous. I mean, if I do it for everybody,
Yes.
I don't even have time to sleep, you know.
Or what
Um,
about the ones that they invite you to one and you log on to and you find out it's a totally different video platform than you've ever seen before. So now you have to go download all their software ahead of the event and hope it works. And sometimes it doesn't work. I know I've been through some where, wow, it's like delayed for a half hour. We can't get video to work or we can't get the sound to work. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
just go with a big, widely used commercial platform. Don't build something in-house and invite us to it.
True.
Especially
Yeah.
when they have the really fancy, features where you can meet people in some area and you just want and like ridiculous complication.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I,
okay.
I know. I remember going to one, yeah, where like you could walk around and you go click on demos and you go to this. Like,
And nothing works. Okay, what do you think are the best events?
Oh, are
um,
you? Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
what makes the best event? I don't know if I want to call out what are the best
No,
events,
no,
but that's
what are? I mean, well, you
what
can you can say anything, but what are the best ones?
I mean. A lot of times I like a vendor that's very topic specific one. Um, yeah, I don't know when you get like naming one company versus another company. I will tell you what makes the best events, and we haven't discussed yet. But here's the signs as a well-run event. And so this may sound silly to people. It's got to be comfortable. If you want to sit there for hours, don't put me crammed up on top of people, like those chairs that connect to each other. So you have 2 inches on either side of you and it's super hot or super cold. If you're going to take this much time and, bring people there, put it in a room that's actually comfortable that you'd actually want to sit in for 5 hours. Stay on schedule. Definitely put some breaks in there. Every, couple hours, give us 15, 20 minutes break. One of my pet peeves is going to a conference and then I have them have to sit through 3 presentations of my peers. I really don't want to see other people's forecast market shares and stuff like that. I find that just to be a waste of my time. I like to, either hear what the vendor has to say or the vendor's clients have to say, or the operator and the operator's clients have to say. I don't want to hear, my industry peers present to me that much. But I mean, for me, those are some of the things I think are definitely important. A lot of the things we brought up, making executives available, but definitely, yeah, make it a
I would agree with you, Daryl. I also would say no more than a day and a half, 2 days max of meetings,
Yeah.
because you kind of just start to tune out after that. Lots of one-on-one opportunities to ask deeper dive questions, a variety of senior level versus product people, so you can ask different type of strategy versus product questions. Make sure your sessions aren't too technical, but also not just a broad, fluffed up marketing piece. And leave time for those more technical sessions for people that really cover that space or have in-depth questions.
Yeah, that's the good use for like the roundtable breakouts.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
go super deep.
Yep, I would agree.
And don't have us there all day for like 7 or 8 hours. Then tell me I have to get on a bus for 2 hours to go see some demo.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I just had another small thing. It's like when a lot of people are jet lagged, don't let them sit in a dark room for hours.
Yeah.
Because that makes jet lag so much harder. And I remember actually talking to you, Emmy, that we were in one of those kind of meetings and we have to punch ourselves. I mean, like keep ourselves awake. And we just to wake each other up if we kind of fall, because you do sometimes kind of, or at least I do. Because it's really hard. I mean, you're tired. You just arrived, right? So, we are like everybody else.
Yeah.
So no, but actually, what I wanted to ask is like, what are the best events? Like not analyst events, like Mobile World Congress. I would say Mobile World Congress would be top one.
Yeah.
I like 5G Americas very much. So what else? What are the ones that you think, the ones that you absolutely want to go?
I would say those are my 2 top industry events with
very
several
different,
companies.
but definitely top.
Yeah. Those are enough for me at this point, at least. But I don't know. What about you guys? Well, I know you go to the TM Forum and Monica and Daryl, and you went too.
That one was actually really good. And I think that the reason why it was good is because there was so much social scope for social interaction. And like all the food was free and whatever. And it's not because the food is free, but because there were a lot of places where you just grab something and you sit down with whoever.
Yeah.
So I actually got to talk to a lot of people. I hardly had any set meetings, but I talked to a lot of people I want to talk to that you just see around. That was a beautiful thing.
Yes, you can't. That's much more difficult to do at MWC.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful event, but it has to be really structured, and that kind of takes so much time. Well, guys, thank you so much for participating in the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Monica. Good chatting with you both.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you all for listening in. And if you have any questions, suggestions, please send this to us at podcast@senseofili.com, and do subscribe to the feed and let people know about it if you like it.